Hi again, everybody. Welcome to the JAKIB Media Sports Network. This is Draft Takes. I'm Derek Gunn. It's brought to you by IBEW Local 98. Well, the Eagles 2021 NFL Draft is all said and done. They went into this draft with 11 picks. They come out with 9 after making some moves. 6 players on the defensive side. Joining me now is a guy I have a lot of admiration for and a lot of respect for. He is Zach Berman of The Athletic. And Zach, I'm going to keep you on as long as I can because I know you're waiting for some of the Eagles players to come out. And when you have to jump off, you just have to jump off. But let's start at the top. Let me get your initial thoughts on them taking Devonta Smith. They moved up. They were at 6. They moved down to 12. They moved back up. And they get one of the premier wide receivers in the National Football League.
Yeah, the best way I can frame it is this. If you told me on January 4th, the day after the season ended, that they would draft Devonta Smith with the number 6 overall pick, I would have said that's a fine outcome. So to still get Devonta Smith and then get that 2022 first-round pick, that's really good. And all it really cost them was the third-round pick this year. That said, they drafted Devonta Smith with Justin Fields on the board. And I point that out as a way of saying when they went down from 6 to 12, that was essentially an admission that they aren't in the quarterback market this year, right? If you were interested in the quarterbacks, you would have stuck around at 6. Right. But the conversation is different. They trade up to 10. Justin Fields is on the board. I personally think I would rather have Justin Fields than Jalen Hurts as my quarterback going forward. And nothing is more important than figuring out the quarterback position. They don't appear to have that calculation, and so that's my only reservation with the pick. But getting Devonta Smith, that's a terrific outcome because we've all seen it with our eyes. He is an exceptional player. The only issue you would have with him as a player is the size. Yep. But if you're going to go with a player who's an exception, you want him to be exceptional, and he's been exceptional.
Does he automatically become the number 1 receiver in this core?
He does, although that says more about these wide receivers than it does Devonta Smith. No, but on most teams, a player like that would be high atop the depth chart. You know, what he did at Alabama was historic, right? He won the Heisman Trophy. He's been productive these past few years. He does everything you would want. So I think that he makes the offense better from day one.
All right. Now, with that said, you're looking at an offense that's going to be very interesting. You finally have a receiver who can stretch the field. They drafted Jalen Reagor in the first round last year. He was supposed to be a speed receiver. Didn't really pan out. Couldn't get separation. Never became the receiver we thought he was going to be. And then he had a Quez Watkins. Then he had a John Hightower. It's hard to determine exactly what the Eagles are trying to do with the wide receiving core because it seems like they keep spinning their wheels. It hasn't panned out with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Greg Ward is a solid slot receiver, but he's not that game changer. So it's hard to determine exactly what they're trying to do or what their perception of a wide receiver is supposed to be within the structure of their organization.
That's a valid point. I would say that it's obviously not ideal to take wide receivers in the first round back-to-back years and to take a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds 3 years in a row. But I've said this before. I said this when I was on with you a few weeks ago. When the Eagles were making this pick, they couldn't pay attention to the depth chart. They couldn't pay attention to the previous investments. They simply need to look at who's the best player, who has the best chance of being a blue chip player. And Devonta Smith fits that criteria. So it's not the best allocation of resources, and they would tell you the same thing. But if he has the chance to be a special player, you do it. And I also think his presence will help Jalen Reagor. I don't know if it'll help J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I don't know if there's more to see from Arcega-Whiteside, to be frank. But in Jalen Reagor's case, I think he slots now as your number 2 guy. That's probably a better fit for him than what they were asking him to do a year ago.
All right, let's go to pick number 2. And, of course, at this stage, we're thinking, okay, they're going to get some defensive help. They're devoid of defensive help in the back end, the linebacking position. But, oh, no, Howie Roseman being Howie Roseman, he decides to take an offensive lineman, a center who has a laundry list of injuries coming out of college. And you're thinking, what the heck is the significance of the move here? Could you figure it out?
Well, I understand it in the sense that he was viewed as a first-round caliber player, right, without the injuries, and we'll get to that in a second. And then off the field in terms of the makeup, the intangibles, has everything you want there. It can be a culture setter in your building. I don't like the expression that, well, without the injuries, he'd be a first-round pick, because the injuries are there. You can't dismiss it. But it becomes a value proposition. At number 37, they were looking at it and they said, this guy has the chance to be special. And it's hard for me, it's hard for anyone on this side of the conversation to really assess the medical, because that's proprietary information. Their doctors, their medical staff, their training staff, they're all looking at that. But you can assess the risk. And I think that there were good players available at 37 who were cleaner. Whether you're looking at the Notre Dame linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Better than I did.
Perhaps Asante Samuel Jr., depending on what you think of him. The safety Trayvon Moehrig from TCU. There were good players still there. But I don't have an issue with them taking Landon Dickerson at 37 if they think this guy has an all-pro ceiling, because it's hard to find blue-chip players. My reservation is more, I think the alternative might have been a bit cleaner.
I guess it's safe to say also that if you're going to take a center, it's not bad to take one in terms of, Jason Kelce is going to call it a career sooner rather than later. And who better to groom under than a Jason Kelce?
Sure, and also he can play guard too. And if you wrote down the best players on this Eagles roster, Jason Kelce and Brandon Brooks would be pretty high up that list. Yep. I don't know if either one of them will be on the team in 2022. So Landon Dickerson is going to start in 2022, most likely. And then this year, we've seen every year the Eagles have to go to a backup lineman. I don't have an issue with them taking a guy who doesn't have a day one starting job. A matter of fact, I think more of the issue is if the Eagles forced that pick because they needed a starting cornerback. You're looking at value, and you hope that the value meets need. This is certainly a long-term need. The question is it worth the risk? Now, I'll frame it this way. In 2017, they took a player they thought was a first-round caliber player in the second round in Sidney Jones.
Exactly.
And he had the injury risk, and it did not work out. But in 2019, they did not take DK Metcalf in the second round because of the injury concern. And we all saw how that turned out. So it can work both ways. It really comes down to your tolerance of risk, what your medical staff is saying. But it is a risk. And I do think there were alternatives that were less risky.
All right. In round number 3, they decided to take a tweener, a guy who played defensive end and defensive tackle. And, for a guy who's only 283 pounds, I don't see him being a defensive tackle in the National Football League. And Milton Williams out of Louisiana Tech. Was that the right move to address the trenches? They need help up front. But again, they still need more help on the back end, because you look at the wealth of receivers they're not just going to face within their division, but on their schedule in general. And you look at the secondary right now, that's a huge cause for concern.
Well, yes, the cornerback depth chart is a cause for concern. I'm not dismissing that,
right?
But I don't think they should draft this year for their 2021 lineup. If they think Milton Williams can become a starting caliber defensive tackle, that's a premium position. And from all indications, I mean, the athletic profile is very impressive. He was a productive player. I don't have an issue with the player per se. What jumps out to me is we all saw during the draft what was going on inside the draft room. And I don't want to read lips, but Howie Roseman even said that when they traded back, there were people in the room who had their favorite players, and those players might not have been on the board with the next pick. And my objection is with the process, and this is what we spoke about last time. Obviously, you're never going to find a consensus, but you don't want a situation where you're making a trade and you miss out on somebody that you want, because the very reason why you make a trade is if you have players stacked in the same tier and you're okay with all outcomes. So if there's an outcome in the trade that you're not happy with, then you shouldn't have made that trade. Again, I'm not in the room. I don't know the particulars. And Milton Williams might very well have been the best pick there, but I am curious about the process in that situation.
Okay. Neil, you were talking about is still getting a lot of play, a lot of discussion. Of course, after they make that third round pick, we get a sneak peek inside the Eagles war room. We see Howie Roseman walking around fist bumping a lot of his personnel in there. He gets to Tom Donahoe, and Tom Donahoe gives him a half-hearted fist bump and looks kind of dejected. Now, obviously, we don't want to blow things up too much, but on the surface, how did you perceive what you saw there?
Well, I perceived it as something that is common in draft situations. In that, that was real. Oftentimes, what you see is the sanitized version. Everyone standing there clapping after a pick. But as you and I both know, there are real conversations, real emotions that occur in the room. But with the Eagles in particular, and I don't think it's unfair because I've spoken to multiple people about this. The process is something that has come into question. The collaboration, hearing different voices, setting the board, following the board, things of that nature. And again, I don't know if they deviated from the board. I don't know what or if there was an issue. But we all saw what was going on in that room. And Howie Roseman, to his credit, acknowledged that there were emotions in that moment, and that is alarming because of the trade back situation. You traded back 3 spots to get the extra 6th round pick. If you traded back in the 3rd round to get the 6th round pick and you missed on someone you wanted, then I would say that's a bad process, because like I said, you don't trade back unless you're okay with all outcomes in the trade.
All right, they go to round number 4, and they finally decide to take a cornerback. They get Zach McPherson, 5'11", 195-pound cornerback of Texas Tech. The one plus about this guy, even though you take him in the 4th round, is he knows how to play pass defense, because in the Big 12, that's all they do is throw the football in the Big 12.
Sure, you're right, and as we've discussed, he's gonna have a chance to play right away. Whether it's on the outside, whether it's in the slot, has a good athletic profile. Had production at Texas Tech. Seemed to be a good spot to draft him based on what people who study this say. So I'm fine with the pick. Now, like we said, if you wait until the 4th round for a need position, you have to live with the fact that, is he playing because he's ready, or is he playing because you're forcing it? That is a question that is it's a real question at this point. But I think it's a fine player.
All right, now you look at the secondary the way it stands right now. You have Darius Slay. To me, he's getting up in age. And I thought he had an okay season last year, but not a season we thought he was capable of having in 2020. Rodney McLeod on the back end is coming off a major ACL tear. They brought in Anthony Harris, but on the other side, you're looking at Avonte Maddox. So give me your comfort level with what we're seeing with the secondary right now.
Not particularly comfortable. Cornerback is a problem. I think it's now McPherson might come in and prove to be ready to play day one. I think Avonte Maddox is best in the slot or even as a deep safety. It doesn't appear they're going to use him at deep safety, but I don't think outside corner is the spot for him. So you need to figure that out. Howie Roseman said last night that they're not playing till September, and it's true. I think back to 2017, the cornerback depth chart did not look good this time of year. It did not look good, frankly, in July. They traded for Ronald Darby during training camp. They go on to win the Super Bowl. So there are still things the Eagles can do to address that depth chart. I don't think you need to have that figured out on May 1st. But you're right. There are multiple spots in that secondary where there are question marks, and safety with Rodney McLeod coming back from his second ACL in 3 years. And they did not prioritize those spots on the first 2 days of the draft when they had opportunities to do so. Day two was it fit the way they want to build long term. They want to build along the trenches, but it did not help the 2022 depth or the 2021 depth chart.
All right. Do you think there's a possibility that the Eagles could go after some low-level veteran players to help fill some of the gap on the road? I mean, they're handcuffed because of their cap restraints. And number two, the cap didn't move as much because of the COVID situation. Yeah. And obviously the league lost a lot of money.
Yeah, I do think they'll be opportunistic. I also think they're going to go into this year recognizing that this roster is not built to be a Super Bowl contender this year. Right now, maybe they have guys who develop quicker, or who are better than they've played so far, and they compete for the division. And like we discussed last time, if you're good along the lines of scrimmage, you're going to be good. But I think if you speak to this front office, you speak to these coaches, and they're being completely honest with you, they know they're going to go into the season with perceived holes. And it's just the nature of their cap situation and some of their roster decisions to date.
Do you think 2021 basically is a process year for the Philadelphia Eagles? Is that the best way to describe it? A process year? Never going to come out and say we have conceded defeat this season because of the situation we're in. But those of us on the outside looking in, is that the best way to perceive it?
Absolutely. They're starting a quarterback who has 4 career starts, who was a second-round pick. They did in free agency. They did not sign anyone to a multi-year deal, right? Everything was a 1-year deal to preserve flexibility. They traded back from 6 to 12 to get a first-round pick next year. They have 10 draft picks next year. They traded a 6 and a 7 today for a 5th rounder next year, which was a good trade. But what they've done cap-wise in trading Carson Wentz, taking it on the chin now with some of these draft pick trades, is they're trying to build this roster for 2022 and beyond. Now, that doesn't help you when you have guys like Jason Kelce, who might be in his last year, and Brandon Graham and Brandon Brooks and Lane Johnson, who have fewer years ahead of them than behind them. But I think if this organization is being honest, and by the way, they've said this publicly. Jeffrey Lurie called this a transition period. This is a year when they are transitioning from the core that they had to what they hope is going to be the next core.
All right, so now we get to the 5th round pick, and to me, outside of Devontae Smith, this was my favorite Eagles selection of the entire draft. They pick up Kenneth Gainwell, a running back out of Memphis. He might be a little bit undersized, but he can do a lot of things like Miles Sanders. He can take it to the house at any given moment, and he's an accomplished pass catcher out of the backfield.
Yeah, a real good player who was a freshman All-American in 2019, opted out last year. But frankly, when you're looking at the running back position, you want a guy who has more tread on his tires, right? Who doesn't have the wear and tear of a 4-year starter somewhere else. Is a player who was not expected to be there in the 5th round. Right. I don't think he's built to be your every down back, but they're not drafting him to be their every down back. So from a complimentary player, I think he can be an upgrade over what Boston Scott was. He can catch the ball. You have him and Miles Sanders in the backfield. I think when you look at what Hines did in Indianapolis for Nick Sirianni, if he can become that type of player, that's a good outcome for the Eagles.
All right, so we get to the 6th round. The Eagles going with 4 picks in that round. They come out after making a trade with Washington with 3 picks, and this is where they start to have a run on nothing but defensive players. And they pick up, I'm still trying to get this one right, Marlon Tuipulotu, the D tackle from USC. He can play the nose or the 3 technique, which is what the Eagles, we can't say what the Eagles like to have because the coaching staff has changed, but we assume this is what this new coaching staff defensively likes to have, versatility along that defensive front.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to tell you, I'm going to have to hop off after this question here. Okay. Sorry, but yeah, no, I agree with you. If you look at him, he's more of a run defender, which is probably why you're finding him on day 3 of the draft.
Yep.
But he's a good player, and if it's a type of thing where if you knew you were going to get him in the 6th round, maybe your 3rd round pick would have been a little different, right? Maybe they take a corner in the 3rd round. But if you're just looking at it based on value, he's good value to get where they got him because he was first team All Pac-12. Yep. He has the size, and if he can be a rotational defensive tackle, play on early downs, and you get that in the 6th round, and you get him on a fixed rookie contract, that's a good outcome.
All right, Zach,
so I like that one.
Go do what you got to do, man. I appreciate you hopping on, and we'll talk to you again down the road. I'm showing a lot of different platforms.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on.
All right, brother. And, of course, we say goodbye.